On Christmas, my sister got a brand new luxury SUV, and I got $30,000 in bills from my mother-in-law, who stared me straight in the eyes and laughed. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Brinley. I thought I married into a decent family, but that Christmas showed me exactly how wrong I was. My husband Taryn always avoided conflict, especially when it came to his mother, Lorinda. She never liked me, and she didn't hide it. Still, I tried to be respectful and hoped things would get better. On Christmas morning, Lorinda made a big show of handing my sister Maeve a fancy envelope. Inside were keys to a brand new SUV. Everyone clapped and cheered. I was happy for her, but it stung a little. Then Lorinda handed me a thin, wrinkled envelope. Inside was a stack of bills, medical charges, utilities, old credit cards, all totaling almost $30,000. She smirked and said, "Since you married my son, these are yours now." The room went quiet, and then she laughed. Even Maeve laughed. My own mother told me not to make a scene. Taryn didn't defend me. I felt completely alone. But instead of crying, I went home and looked through everything carefully. The bills weren't mine. They were debts tied to Lorinda and Taryn that she had pushed into my name. I contacted an attorney friend, and we built a case. A week later, I served Lorinda legal papers. The shock on her face was the best gift I got that year. I left Taryn soon after. The debts were cleared, and Lorinda had to pay fines. That Christmas hurt, but it also set me free. When I look back to the early days of my marriage, I can see the small signs I ignored. I met Taryn during a quiet spring afternoon at a mutual friend's gathering. He was warm, gentle, and carried himself with a softness that felt safe. I thought that meant we understood each other. What I didn't notice was how quickly he shut down when tension appeared. He preferred silence over standing up for anything, especially when it involved the people who raised him. The first time I met his mother, Lorinda, she gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She sized me up in a single glance, as if deciding exactly where I ranked in her world, and it was clear I didn't rank high. She spoke to me politely enough, but always with a tone that hinted I didn't quite fit into the picture she imagined for her son. It didn't help that she constantly brought up Maeve, my sister-in-law, as if she were the standard every woman should follow. Maeve was always described as graceful, accomplished, perfect. I tried not to take it personally, but the message was loud even when unspoken. Family gatherings made the distance clearer. Lorinda would direct conversations toward Maeve's successes, while handing me small, dismissive comments disguised as advice. Taryn never said a word. He would sit beside me, hands folded, gaze lowered, acting as though silence could keep everything balanced. I told myself he simply didn't want conflict, that it was his way of keeping peace. But each time he stayed quiet, it chipped away at something inside me. I tried to build a place for myself among them, hoping they would see me for who I was. Instead, it felt like they were always waiting for me to prove I deserved to be there. Growing up with Maeve meant living beside a spotlight that never pointed my way. She was the one people gravitated toward without trying, the one adults praised before she even opened her mouth. By the time we reached adulthood, it felt like the world around us had agreed she deserved more attention, more praise, more generosity. I didn't resent her for it, I just learned to shrink myself to avoid being compared. Holidays made the difference impossible to miss. Relatives arrived with bags practically bursting with things picked out just for her. She received weekends away, jewelry she never asked for, little envelopes filled with spending money. Even when she had done nothing remarkable, everyone acted like she had achieved something grand. I would smile, say thank you for whatever small item I received, and try not to notice how uneven everything felt. What stung most was how easily our mother played into it. She never acted cruel, just casually dismissive. If Maeve wanted something, it appeared without delay. If I expressed discomfort or disappointment, she brushed it aside as if I were exaggerating. "You read too much into things," she would say, "or you're imagining problems where there aren't any." After hearing that enough times, I started doubting my own reactions. When Christmas came around each year, I prepared myself for the familiar pattern. Maeve would walk into the room glowing, wrapped in confidence, knowing exactly what was waiting under the tree for her. I would sit nearby, trying to convince myself I didn't care. I tried to believe affection wasn't measured in boxes or bows. Still, standing next to her always left a quiet ache in my chest, a reminder that I occupied a smaller space in the family picture. Even so, I never expected how sharply that imbalance would show itself that particular winter. The weeks before that holiday felt heavier than usual. Lorinda called often, dropping hints that sounded more like instructions. She spoke about the upcoming gathering with a tone that suggested expectations had already been set. Each time, she used the same phrase, contribute like family, as if it were a gentle reminder, but the meaning behind it carried weight. She listed ingredients for dishes she wanted, decorations she thought were necessary, and items she insisted every household should bring. None of it was cheap. I didn't want conflict, so I told her I would handle my part. To make that possible, I picked up every extra shift I could. Early mornings, late closings, anything that brought in a little more. The long hours left me drained, but I kept going, hoping the effort would smooth over the strain that had been building between us for months. During all of this, Taryn barely reacted. When I tried to talk to him about the pressure, he avoided the conversation with quiet nods or vague promises that he would talk to her soon. That moment never came. His silence stretched between us, and even though I didn't say it aloud, I felt the distance growing. I kept telling myself that once the holiday arrived, things might soften, that warmth and tradition would ease everyone's attitudes. As the date approached, I wrapped gifts, prepared dishes, and arranged things exactly as Lorinda asked. Even when I felt frustration bubbling inside me, I pushed it down. I wanted this gathering to feel different, like a chance to reset the tone between us. I hoped that showing goodwill would be enough for her to finally see me without judgment. But under all that hope, there was a quiet warning in my chest, a sense that something was building, something I wasn't prepared for. Christmas morning started with a strange mix of excitement and uneasiness. Lorinda's place looked more like a showroom than a home, every corner filled with decorations arranged so perfectly it felt unnatural. People filled the room quickly, greeting one another with bright voices while settling into their usual spots. I found a place near the edge of the couch, trying to blend into the background and avoid drawing any attention. The tree was surrounded by an overwhelming number of wrapped packages, far more than I'd ever seen at a family gathering. Some were tiny and glittery, others large enough to hide furniture. Ribbons curled across the floor, making the whole scene look almost staged. I tried to focus on the chatter around me, but my eyes kept drifting toward the gifts. Then I saw it. On the table near the fireplace sat an envelope made of heavy, glossy paper. It stood out because it wasn't decorated with any holiday print, just simple and expensive looking. Attached to the outside was a tag written in elegant handwriting, "For Maeve." Something metallic glinted beneath the flap, catching the light every time someone moved near it. The shape made it obvious what it held: keys. A small twist formed in my stomach. I reminded myself not to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't ignore the familiar tension pressing against my ribs. The envelope looked important, far more important than anything I had said under the tree. I tried telling myself it didn't matter, that gifts weren't supposed to be the measure of anything. Still, that quiet ache I had come to know too well pushed its way to the surface. The room buzzed with excitement while everyone settled in, but all I could think about was that envelope and the uneasy feeling it stirred deep inside me, warning me that the morning was about to shift in a way I couldn't predict. The moment came faster than I expected. Lorinda called Maeve to the center of the room with a proud smile, the kind she reserved only for her. Maeve walked up with that bright confidence she always seemed to carry, and the envelope was placed directly into her hands, almost like a ceremony. Everyone leaned forward, waiting. Maeve slid a finger under the flap and pulled out a pair of shiny keys attached to a sleek black fob. Her gasp echoed through the room before she even registered what it meant. Then she squealed, loud and thrilled, holding the keys high as if she had won a prize. Lorinda clapped, beaming as she announced she had arranged a brand new SUV for her. The room erupted with cheers and congratulations. People rushed to hug Maeve, telling her how deserving she was, how exciting the surprise must be. She spun around with the keys, laughing as relatives reached out to see them up close. I kept my hands folded tightly in my lap, lifting my face into what I hoped looked like a warm smile. I didn't want anyone to see how my stomach dipped or how my throat tightened. It wasn't jealousy, I had learned long ago not to expect anything big. But something about the whole moment unsettled me. I kept reminding myself that gifts don't define worth, that celebrations don't need to be equal to feel meaningful. Still, there was a strange pressure building inside my chest, something quiet and heavy. It wasn't about the car. It was the way the room shifted completely around Maeve, as if nothing and no one else mattered. As the excitement continued, I sat in the corner, trying to stay steady. Something in the air felt slightly tilted, like the morning had started sliding toward a direction I couldn't yet see. When the excitement over Maeve's surprise finally settled, Lorinda turned toward me with a look that made my stomach knot. She reached into a side drawer and pulled out a flimsy envelope that looked nothing like the one Maeve had received. The paper was creased, the edges bent, as if it had been handled carelessly for a long time. She held it between two fingers and extended it toward me with a forced sweetness that didn't match her eyes. I accepted it carefully, trying to ignore the way the room grew quiet. The envelope felt unusually heavy for something so thin. I slid out the papers inside and unfolded the first one. It took only a second for the numbers to hit me. A medical statement with a balance so high it made my breath catch. Behind it, more papers, utility notices, overdue balances, credit cards tied to my name. Each page carried amounts that stacked into a total that made my hands shake. I stared at the signatures and account details, feeling the color drain from my face. Before I could speak, Lorinda stepped closer, her voice dripping with false warmth. "Since you married my son," she said, "these are now your responsibility." She tilted her head, studying my reaction like it amused her. Then she added, "Welcome to the family." A sharp laugh followed, full, loud, and meant to sting. It cut through the silence, bouncing around the room while everyone watched me hold the pile of debts I had never seen before. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Confusion and disbelief wrapped around me so tightly I couldn't breathe. No one moved. Not even Taryn. He sat still, eyes fixed on the floor, pretending he hadn't heard a thing. And as Lorinda's laughter echoed, a cold understanding settled in my chest. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. And I had been chosen as the target. Everything around me blurred for a moment, as if the room tilted under my feet. I held the papers so tightly they crinkled, but I couldn't loosen my grip. A faint sound broke through the ringing in my ears, Maeve's soft giggle. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to feel like a pinch. She looked away quickly, pretending she hadn't reacted, yet the smirk on her lips said enough. I tried to steady my breathing, but my chest felt tight. My mother leaned toward me, barely moving her mouth as she whispered, "Don't make a scene." The words slipped through my spine like ice water. Even in that moment, her biggest concern was appearance, not the fact that I had just been handed a mountain of debt with my name stamped all over it. I glanced at Taryn, hoping for even the smallest sign of support. He sat stiffly beside the arm of the chair, hands clasped, eyes fixed on some spot in the carpet as if he could disappear into it. He didn't reach for me. He didn't ask what was going on. He didn't question his mother. He didn't even look at the papers. It was as though he had been carved from stone. I waited, just a second, for him to break the silence. But nothing came. Something inside me snapped quietly. Not anger, not tears, just realization. A sharp, clean understanding that settled deeper than any emotion. Every polite smile, every forced kindness, every time they left me out or talked around me suddenly clicked into place. I had been hoping for loyalty where none existed. I had convinced myself that time would change things, that effort would soften their opinions. Standing there with a stack of debts I didn't create, surrounded by faces that showed no concern, I understood the truth. I was completely alone in that room. And I always had been. A strange calm washed over me as I stood there. No shouting, no tears, no argument rose up inside me. I simply placed the papers back into the envelope, straightened my posture, and walked out of the room without a word. The laughter and chatter behind me faded as I stepped outside into the cold air. The quiet felt like the first real breath I'd taken all day. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope spread out in front of me. I turned on a small lamp and began reading each page carefully. At first, the numbers made my head spin, but then certain details started catching my eye: addresses that weren't mine, signatures that didn't match my handwriting, dates from years before I even met Taryn. Page after page revealed the same pattern. None of these accounts belonged to me. As I checked the fine print, a sick certainty settled in. These charges were linked to Lorinda and, in some cases, to Taryn. Old obligations that should never have been connected to my name had somehow been reassigned. The realization hit like a slow, burning wave. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate paperwork manipulation, done quietly and confidently, as if no one would ever question it. I gathered every sheet, arranging them in order, and took photos of each for backup. Then I opened my laptop and typed a message to Rowan, a friend from years back who worked in law. I explained what I had found, attaching the images. My hand shook slightly as I hit send, but not from fear. It was something else: clarity, maybe even resolve. When I closed the laptop, the house felt different. The silence no longer pressed on me, it steadied me. I knew what needed to happen next. Whatever they thought they could pin on me, they had no idea what I was capable of when pushed this far. A week passed with a tense, quiet anticipation hanging over me. I sent a calm, neutral invitation to Taryn and Lorinda, asking them to come for a discussion about important family matters. I made sure everything was in place before they arrived: the table cleared, papers organized, and my laptop open with everything documented. When they walked in, their expressions carried the same self-satisfied smugness they always had, as if they expected me to be intimidated or apologetic. I gestured for them to sit, keeping my voice steady. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I slid the envelope and the folder of documents toward them. Then I opened my laptop to the video call I had arranged with my attorney, Rowan, who joined immediately. Rowan's voice cut through the room clearly, detailing the charges: identity fraud, financial coercion, and deliberate misrepresentation of accounts. Lorinda's eyes widened slowly, and color drained from her face. Her usual composure cracked, her hands trembling slightly as she leaned back in her chair. Taryn's mouth opened, and he started to say something, but I cut him off before he could regain any confidence. "No private discussions," I said firmly. "Everything is on the table." For the first time, the room felt different. Lorinda's smirk was gone, replaced with disbelief. Taryn's usual silence faltered, and he tried to explain, to beg, to rationalize. But I held the papers steadily, meeting their eyes without hesitation. The power had shifted in a way they clearly hadn't anticipated. By the time the call ended, Rowan had confirmed that legal action would proceed if restitution wasn't made. Lorinda's posture slumped, and Taryn stayed quiet, realizing that the easy path of ignoring me had vanished. For once, I was in control, and they had no way to twist the situation back in their favor. The next day, I moved forward without hesitation. I filed the paperwork for separation, making sure every detail was accurate and accounted for. Alongside the filing, I demanded that all fraudulent charges be reversed immediately and that Lorinda take full responsibility for the debts she had tried to place on me. I made it clear that if she resisted, a complete investigation would follow, leaving no corner unexamined. Taryn appeared at my door later, his face pale and uneasy. He stumbled over his words, trying to justify his mother's actions. "She didn't mean for it to get this bad," he said, voice shaky. I listened without interrupting, studying the way his confidence had evaporated. There was no urgency in me to negotiate. I had already made my decisions, and now it was time for him to make his. I looked him in the eyes and spoke plainly. You have one choice. You either support me and stand with me through this, or you stay loyal to your mother. There's no middle ground. My tone was firm, leaving no room for debate or hesitation. He swallowed hard, the conflict in his expression clear. After a long pause, he turned away, the decision made. I can't, he whispered, his voice barely audible. He walked toward the door, leaving behind the family he had once called his own. As the door closed, a strange relief washed over me. There was pain, yes, but also clarity. I had drawn a line and refused to step back. The weight of betrayal from those closest to me was heavy, yet for the first time, I felt the power of standing firmly in my own truth. I was done waiting for someone else to act, I was taking my life into my own hands. Months drifted by with a slow, steady rhythm as the legal process unfolded. Each hearing, each signed document, confirmed that Lorinda would be held accountable for the schemes she had tried to pin on me. Fines were issued, restitution arranged, and one by one, the fraudulent accounts vanished from my records. Every cleared statement brought a lightness I hadn't felt in years, as if a weight I had carried my whole adult life was finally lifting. Word reached me quietly that May's SUV, the centerpiece of that fateful Christmas, had been repossessed. Lorinda's finances had crumbled under the weight of her own actions, leaving her unable to maintain the lavish gestures she once flaunted. I felt a mixture of vindication and calm knowing that the imbalance had begun to correct itself without me needing to gloat. I found a small apartment not far from work, modest but full of light and quiet. Unpacking each box felt symbolic, each item carefully placed, creating a space that was entirely mine. There were no judging eyes, no whispers, no comparisons. I could hear myself think and feel again without distraction. The mornings became peaceful, the evenings quiet, and for the first time, I could breathe without anxiety pressing on my chest. The stress of other people's control, their manipulation and favoritism, had been replaced by a steady sense of autonomy. It was simple, ordinary life, yet it carried a richness I hadn't realized I craved. Sitting by the window one evening, a cup of tea warming my hands, I realized that freedom felt different than I had imagined. It wasn't flashy or loud, it was steady, calm, and entirely mine. For the first time, I truly felt at home with myself. Looking back, I realize how deeply betrayal can cut when it comes from the people you expect to protect you. It isn't always loud or dramatic, sometimes it's quiet, calculated, and wrapped in the guise of love or family duty. I felt that pain, sharp and unrelenting, but it also forced me to discover something I hadn't known I had, a strength that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. I used to measure myself by how others treated me, hoping for recognition or care that never arrived. Over time, I understood that my worth wasn't tied to their opinions, their gifts, or their grudging acceptance. I discovered that the courage to stand up, to set boundaries, and to walk away when loyalty wasn't offered, was entirely within my control. Christmas, which once carried only pressure and comparison, became the turning point. The day that had seemed like a symbol of humiliation and imbalance transformed into a marker of freedom. I wasn't defined by the debt, the laughter, or the favoritism anymore. I was defined by the choices I made in response, calm, deliberate, and self-respecting choices. Now, I live with a quiet confidence, knowing that I can rely on my instincts. I've learned to choose myself even when no one else does. It isn't selfish, it's survival, it's growth, and it's reclaiming what was always mine. If my story teaches anything, it's that the people closest to us can sometimes hurt the most, but that same challenge can awaken strength we never knew existed. Listen to your gut, protect your heart, and don't wait for permission to prioritize yourself. That's where true freedom begins.